Annabel seized Muriel's hand from the kneeling Duke and cried, "Before the county, we sent the plainest sister because she was meant to fail." The word fail went through the ballroom like a dropped tray. The Duke stayed on one knee, his hand still open where hers had been. Muriel drew her hand free of Annabel's grip and said, "Your Grace, stand. If you ask before this county, you will hear my terms before you hear my answer." A matron's glass stopped halfway to her lips. The master of ceremonies lowered his hand without being told. Drusilla's painted fan hung open and forgotten against her gown. Mr. Frith took one small step backward, out of the light. Behind Muriel, her two beautiful sisters stood shoulder to shoulder in rose and gold, rigid as portraits, while the Duke of Beaumare rose slowly to his feet and waited for her terms, whatever they would be, and for the answer no one in the county could guess. A fortnight earlier, Muriel caught the carriage door before Annabel could shut it on her sleeve. "Do pay attention," said Annabel, not unkindly, which was worse. She settled back against the cushions and smoothed her gloves, finger by finger. "Here is how it will be. You will go through the door first, alone, before we are announced. You will take whichever room is smallest. You will refuse every dance you are offered. Every one, Muriel, even from the fat curate, if there is a fat curate. And you will wear the grey." She paused, then drew on her second glove. "And in every room you will keep to the wall, and let no one finish a sentence but Drusilla and me. You carry things so well. Carry this too, and carry it quietly." "It is a house party," said Muriel, "not a shop window." "Call it what you like," said Annabel, "so long as you stand where you are put and hold what you are given." Drusilla laughed, then leaned across and pressed something into Muriel's hand. It was a fan, plain beechwood, unpainted, the kind a housekeeper might carry to church. The two painted fans, the ivory one with the roses and the silk one with the gilt birds, stayed in Drusilla's lap. "You won't need better," Drusilla said. "You're not to be looked at." Muriel felt the shame arrive and stand in her chest like a guest she had admitted too many times to turn away now. She closed her fingers around the beech fan and said nothing. She had run the Fallowby house for 9 years. The accounts, the servants, the apologies, the remembering. She had told herself that being necessary was a kind of belonging. It had made this carriage ride possible. 3 daughters travelled to Beaumare. Only 2 had been sent to be seen. The invitation had come for the beauties, and Papa had read it twice, counted the Duke's rent roll once, and accepted for Annabel and Drusilla before the ink was dry, then sent Muriel after them the way a careful man sends his ledger along with his goods, to keep the letters answered, the luggage counted, and the consequences carried, so that nothing his daughters did on the road to a coronet need settle on his own name. That much was Papa's arrangement, and it was years old. The rest, the grey, the smallest room, the refused dances, the plain sister set beside the bright ones to prove them brighter, was the sister's own refinement, added in the carriage that morning. So she went through the great door of Beaumare House first, and alone. She greeted the housekeeper by name, Mrs. Cole, who had signed the letters arranging the visit, and thanked the 2 footmen who came out for the luggage, of which there was a mountain, almost none of it Muriel's. When the younger footman's grip slipped and a hat box went down the steps, Annabel's voice came sharp from the carriage. "That boy? The strap was mine to check," Muriel said clearly, before the sentence could finish becoming an accusation. "I packed it badly. Nothing in it can break." She picked the box up herself and put it back in the boy's arms, and the boy breathed again. From the shadow of the doorway, A silver-haired lady in violet watched all of it and said nothing at all. Her eyes stayed on Muriel a moment longer than the scene required. And then a man came out of the house, tall, dark-headed, dressed too plainly to be anyone's idea of a duke, which was how Muriel knew at once that he was the duke. Godfrey Walcott, Duke of Beaumere, came down his own steps, passed the mountain of luggage, and stopped in front of the eldest sister in grey. "Miss Fallowby," he said, "you came through the door first. I was sent through it first, Your Grace." He looked at her a beat longer than politeness needed. "Those are not the same thing," he said. "Welcome to Beaumere." Behind her, the carriage released its treasures at last. Annabel and Drusilla descended into the forecourt like a change in the weather, rose and gold. Muriel watched the yard reorder itself around them, footmen straightening, guests at the windows, Mr. Frith materializing from somewhere with his hat already off. She watched herself be moved, gently and without malice, to the outside of every sightline. Every servant in the forecourt answered to her face, she noticed. Every guest looked an inch past it. But the Duke had not yet turned to the weather. He was still looking at the woman in grey, with an expression Muriel could not afford to read, while Annabel's voice rang bright across the gravel, already answering a question that had been addressed to no one. At dinner that first evening, the Fallowby sisters performed, and the table applauded, and Muriel handed things. Annabel spoke of Italian music with a marchioness. Drusilla was persuaded to the pianoforte, and was genuinely good, which made everything easier for everyone. And whenever a question wandered down the table toward Muriel, did she ride? Had she seen the gardens? What did she think of the county? One of her sisters caught it in the air and answered it for her, smiling, before Muriel's mouth could open. It was done so smoothly that most of the table never noticed it was being done at all. Mr. Frith noticed. Mr. Frith noticed everything that could be spent. "The useful plain sister," he said to the gentleman beside him, in the carrying tone of a man who intends to be overheard by the right people. "Every family of beauties keeps one. She completes the row, you see, the way a plain border completes a garden." Annabel's laugh rewarded him from 3 seats away, light as a coin tossed to a good dog. Muriel felt her face heat and kept her eyes on the epergne, and hated that she kept her eyes on the epergne. Then the Duke, from the head of the table, said, "Miss Fallowby, you arranged your family's affairs in Norfolk, I understand. The harvest contracts as well, or only the household?" "Oh, Muriel doesn't trouble herself with," Annabel began. Godfrey did not look at Annabel. He did not fill the pause either. He simply waited, with his eyes on Muriel and his glass untouched, and let the silence grow, until it belonged to no one but her. "Both," Muriel said at last. "The contracts are simpler. Wheat does not mind how you phrase things." Somebody laughed who had not intended to. The Duke's mouth moved almost. Later, between the removes, Drusilla's wineglass went over, tipped by her own elbow reaching for the candied fruit, and Drusilla gasped, "Oh, girl, you've—" at the young maid, Sarah, who had been nowhere near it. The maid went white. The end of the table turned to look at her, that terrible collective look that is itself the punishment. Muriel opened the beach fan with a small crack of sound. Heads turned toward the noise instead. "The cloth is already ruined on my side too," she said easily, tipping her own water an inch. "It's these narrow tables. No, leave it. We shall flood the house between us. You might bring more of the cherries when you go." The maid, given a task and a door, took both and escaped. The table went back to itself. Drusilla, who had already forgotten the girl existed, reached again for the fruit. The Duke appeared at Muriel's shoulder as the ladies rose, and said, very low. "Shall I seat you elsewhere tomorrow, out of range of your sister's answers?" She understood the kindness of it, and felt how easily kindness could become one more person deciding where she went. "No," said Muriel, "I want you to let me answer." Godfrey studied her. Whatever he had been about to arrange, she watched him set it down. "Then I will keep asking," he said, "and keep waiting." And he bowed and did nothing else, and the doing nothing else, she would think later, was the first thing he gave her that no man ever had. In the drawing room, the silver-haired lady in violet made herself known at last. Lady Minerva Walcote, the Duke's aunt and hostess of Beaumere, who patted the sofa beside her and said to Muriel, "Sit here. You have been standing where the light is worst all evening, and I don't believe it was an accident of the room." Before Muriel could decide what to do with that, Minerva raised her voice to the company. "You will all stay through Friday fortnight, because that Friday Beaumere holds its county ball. Before anyone begins scheming," her eyes did not go to anyone in particular, which was itself an art. "It is not an announcement of anything. It is the house's welcome to the county. Farmers' daughters will dance in this room beside baronets, as they did in my father's time. That is the whole of its purpose, and I'll thank you all to leave its purpose alone." A welcome, thought Muriel, a room where the doors opened outward. She found she wanted to see it more than she had wanted anything in some time. Annabel wanted to see it too. Muriel watched her sister's face across the drawing room and could read the arithmetic in it as plainly as a ledger. A ballroom, the county assembled, the Duke at the centre, and Annabel beside him, where the county could witness what everyone would by then assume. Friday was no longer a welcome. Friday, in Annabel's ledger, had just become a coronation, and every hour between now and then was for arranging the crown. Muriel closed the beach fan in her lap, quietly, and began to watch her sister the way she watched the weather before a harvest. By the second morning, Beaumere House had begun, without knowing it was doing so, to arrange itself around Muriel Fallowby. It happened in small transactions. At breakfast, she asked the footman, "Thomas, isn't it?" to move old Colonel Bracknell's chair so his good ear faced the table, because she had watched him smile through two conversations he could not hear. In the morning room, she drew Miss Hartle, a county squire's daughter, into the talk with a question addressed to the girl by name, a half-second before the girl's father could answer on her behalf, and watched the young face come alight like a window at dusk. She did not collect these people. She simply saw them. They felt themselves seen. By 11 o'clock, 3 separate guests had told Muriel things they had told no one else in the house. They told her because she listened without spending. That was the whole secret. It was not a secret. A confidence given to Annabel returned to the drawing room within a day, polished into a story. A confidence given to Muriel went nowhere at all. People can smell that in a woman, and are drawn to it without knowing why. Before noon, Drusilla found Muriel alone in the morning room, her hands actually wringing. "I've done something," Drusilla said, to Lady Minerva. "I said, we were speaking of the ball, and I said it must be a relief to hostess a party where nobody minds what the hostess wears any longer. I meant it kindly. Muriel, I meant her age was a freedom. You told your hostess she is past being looked at, in her own house." "Fix it," Drusilla said. "You always know the thing to say. Tell me an excuse." "No excuse," Muriel said. "You will say this: I insulted you carelessly and I am ashamed of it. I ask your pardon. Nothing about what you meant. What you meant is the part that wounds. That's so bare. It's so honest. Bare is why it works. Drusilla delivered the apology in the gallery an hour later, word for word, wearing it as her own invention. Lady Minerva, who had happened to be rereading the same letter by the same window when the sisters passed, and who had heard every syllable of the rehearsal through the morning-room door, accepted it gravely, and looked past Drusilla's shoulder at Muriel with an expression Muriel pretended not to understand. The look said, "I know whose sentence that was." The look said, "You mend the people who are breaking you." It was Godfrey who came looking for her that afternoon, in the long gallery where the portraits hung. "I have noticed something about my own house party," he said. "Whenever anything true needs saying, the room goes and finds you first. I have decided to be like the room." Shame's opposite moved in her, something warm and frightening. She kept her voice dry. "And what true thing needs saying, Your Grace?" He stood before a portrait of the second Duke and spoke to it rather than to her, which she understood was how a guarded man manages honesty. "People tell me what they want from a duke," he said. "Rents lowered, livings granted, daughters noticed. It is years since anyone told me a thing merely because it was true and meant for Godfrey." He turned. "They tell you. I have watched them do it for 2 days. Why? Because they believe a plain woman has no market to sell it in," Muriel said. "They are wrong about the reason and right about the result. I could spend what I am told. I choose not to. It is the one wealth nobody ever thinks to rob. That is a lonely kind of wealth." "Yes," she said, before she could dress it in something safer. "It is." The word sat between them, plainly. Neither of them picked it up to soften it. The letting it sit felt more intimate than anything anyone had said to her in years. "Your sisters," Godfrey said at last. She watched effort come into his face, the effort of a man choosing his words against his instinct. "What they do to you at that table. I could end it with one sentence. Say the word and I will say it. And then it would be your sentence," Muriel said. "And I would be a thing you had defended, which is only a better dressed way of being a thing. Their conduct is not yet mine to answer. When it becomes mine, I will answer it myself." He bowed his head slightly and did not argue. She saw what the not arguing cost him, and liked him more for the cost than she would have liked the rescue. At the far end of the gallery, a rose-coloured figure had stopped in the doorway. Annabel had come to make an entrance and found no one waiting for one. She stood quite still, watching the Duke of Beaumaris lean against a window-sill, talking to the wrong sister, watching him look at Muriel, and something changed in her face, arithmetic giving way to something older and colder, before she turned and went away without being seen at all. She had come amused. She left alarmed. Between those two states, for a woman like Annabel, there was no distance at all. The days after that did not hurry. Beaumaris settled into the shape of a house that means to keep its guests a fortnight. Cards after dinner, music in the afternoons, walks in the garden between the showers, and through all of it, the Duke of Beaumaris kept finding reasons to want the plain sister's opinion. Was the West Meadow drained or only resting? Would Miss Hartle's father take a smaller rent or only a longer lease? Did the London road want mending before the ball or after? He asked as a man asks who means to use the answer, and she gave them as a woman who had run a household on worse ground than his. She saw him unperformed, too. She came on him one morning in the stable-yard with a tenant whose barn had burned, promising nothing, only listening with his hat in his hand like any other man's. And over those evenings she watched him learn the things she had known since girlhood, that some troubles mend themselves if a great man only keeps his hands off them. Twice she watched him keep his hands off, and every evening the same small company drew to the fire where Muriel sat. Miss Hartle, the deaf colonel, the vicar's two spinster sisters, a merchant's wife with a good laugh, so that by the end of the first week, Annabel had stopped calling it Muriel's dullness, and begun, behind her lovely face, to call it a campaign. One evening in the second week, Lady Minerva opened the small ballroom for the house party. Nothing grand, a master of ceremonies and 2 fiddles, the carpets up, and Annabel went to work. Muriel watched the work being done, because she had kept her family's books for 9 years and knew how a transaction was structured. First, Annabel by the fire, to a half-circle of guests, in her carrying voice, "I do think plain girls ought to be grateful for any partner at all. It is the beauties who may be particular." A general laugh. Then, not 2 minutes later, Mr. Frith detaching himself from that same half-circle and crossing to Muriel with his bow already tipping, the invitation timed to follow the sentence, so that whatever Muriel did next had already been named. Accept, and she was the grateful plain girl. Refuse, and she stood partnerless before the county's eyes for the rest of the night, exactly as her instructions required. Annabel had built a door with humiliation on both sides of it. Now Frith was holding it open. He could not even do that cleanly. As he bowed, his eyes went past Muriel to Miss Hartle in her made-over gown. He said, at a volume calibrated for the fire circle, "One dances where one can, of course, though I see the county has sent us its second-best wardrobe tonight." The girl in the made-over gown heard it. Muriel watched her hear it. "Miss Fallowby," Frith finished, hand extended, smiling. "Shall we?" "No," said Muriel. Not archly, not wrapped in a headache or a turned ankle, or any of the small silk lies that let everyone keep their footing. Just the one word, in a clear voice while she looked at him. Frith's smile held its shape a moment past its death. "I beg your pardon?" "You mocked that lady's gown to amuse a fireside," Muriel said. "I won't reward it with a dance." No. The fire circle had gone quiet. She felt the machine close around her precisely as it had been built to, partnerless now, publicly, by her own word, with the first set forming, and Annabel's prophecy about plain girls standing proved in the middle of the floor. She straightened her back and prepared to stand there all night, because dignity was the one property her sisters could not carry off in their luggage. And then the Duke of Beaumeur set down his glass. He came the length of the room, not by the wall, not by way of 3 convenient conversations, straight across the open floor, through the forming set, past Annabel in mid-sentence, so that every eye in the ballroom had time to understand where he was going, and to run out of ways to disbelieve it. He stopped in front of Muriel Fallowby in her grey dress, and bowed, and said, "Miss Fallowby, may I have this set, if you want it?" If you want it. 4 words that unbuilt Annabel's door entirely, because a woman who may refuse a duke is not a woman grateful for any partner, but a woman being asked. "One dance," said Muriel. "Yes." The room paid for the moment in small arrested things. Frith's glass stopped an inch short of his mouth and stayed there. Annabel's painted fan hung open in her hand, perfectly still, a bird shot in flight. 2 couples missed the leading couple's first figure and had to recover. And Lady Minerva took hold of her chair and turned it, deliberately, the full quarter circle required to watch the floor, with the expression of a woman settling in at the theatre after 2 dull acts. They danced. He was better than she had allowed for. She felt it within the first 8 bars. He was following her, not steering her through the figures to display what a duke's favour looked like, but fitting his timing to hers, so that the dance kept asking her a small question and waiting on her answer, over and over. Warmth climbed from her hands, to her wrists, to somewhere under her collarbone that she could not pretend was exertion. Call it what it is, she told herself. She wanted him, the mouth and the patience both, the man who crossed a floor and asked permission at the end of it. Desire. There. Named, filed, and not one whit tamer for the filing. Frith is wearing a waistcoat the colour of a fresh bruise, Godfrey said under the music, close to her ear as the figure turned them together, and he is waiting for the room to admire it. Then the kind thing, Muriel murmured back, is to deny him his audience. She felt the laugh climb, and only just kept it behind her teeth. Godfrey, for his part, made his own discovery somewhere in the second figure, when Muriel, flushed and certain, her plain face lit from underneath, turned under his raised arm. He had crossed the floor telling himself it was justice. It was not justice. He was in love. It had happened somewhere in those first days without applying for permission, at a carriage door, over a shielded footman, in a gallery where a woman said the word lonely without flinching. It was finished. The only question left in him was how long he could keep it decently in hand while she decided what she wanted. He said nothing. He knew what the room would do to her with a declaration, and knew too what the room did not, that she would need to be certain the choosing was hers. The music ended. He bowed over her hand and did not let it go at once, a breath longer than the figure asked, his thumb once across her knuckles, the plain, grateful pressure of a man loath to have it end. By the doors, Thomas the footman stood with his tray forgotten against his chest, watching her be held gently, his eyes wet and careless of who saw. Something reached a place in Muriel that nothing had reached in years. In this house, someone was simply glad of her. Then Annabel began smiling again, which those who knew her understood was the most dangerous thing she did. "Will you walk?" Godfrey asked her, when the set had broken up and the room's attention had been dragged back to the dancing. The south gallery is lit and open, and every chaperone in the house can see into it. I am told that is its chief architectural feature. Then it was built for exactly this, said Muriel, and walked with him. The gallery ran along the garden front, its tall windows open to the June night, moths committing their small suicides against the sconces. She had laid the beach fan on the stone balustrade of the open window while she pulled her shawl closer. The draught off the gardens took it, a hop, a slide, a half spin toward the drop into the dark, and they both moved, and it was Godfrey's hand that caught it against the stone. He turned and gave it back to her. That was all it was, a plain fan passing between two people, except that her fingers closed over the beechwood, and his had not yet left it, and neither hand moved, and the whole warm night came down to 2 inches of wood, carrying the heat of 2 hands. She could hear the fiddles from the ballroom, far away, like weather in another county. His thumb was against the side of her hand. Neither of them had breathed in some time. Muriel. Her name, not her situation. He had never used it before. He was close enough now that she had to choose between his eyes and his mouth, and she wanted, the narrator will not dress this in something tidier, she wanted to be kissed, wanted it in her hands and her spine and her sensible shoes, wanted it the way you want water. And he, who could have simply leaned down the remaining distance, did not. He held still at the last edge of stillness and asked, "May I?" "No," said Muriel, "not yet." He stepped back at once, all the way back, a full pace, his hand leaving the fan, leaving hers. She watched what the step cost him, watched him pay it with his jaw set and his breath managed, and understood that his restraint was not coolness. It was carried weight. Somehow that made the wanting worse. "Because this house believes you are courting my sister," she said, Every guest under this roof believes it, and until they don't, whatever this is stands on ground that isn't ours." "There is no promise," Godfrey said. "There has never been a word, a letter, an understanding. I have courted no one." "I believe you. It changes nothing. Your silence has been letting the belief grow for days now, Your Grace. And the belief has been useful to you. It kept every matchmaking mama in this county at a respectful distance, while you went unbothered. A man may be innocent of a rumor and still be living comfortably inside it. He took it without flinching and without haste, which she was learning was simply his way with a true thing. "Then I will," he began. She saw the fixing instinct rise in him, the Duke reaching for the lever that made problems stop. "What you will do," she said, "is not decided here, at night, 2 inches from this." Her voice was not entirely steady. She let him hear that it wasn't, because pretending calm would have been its own lie. He almost smiled. "No, you're right, Muriel." "There you are." Annabel's voice arrived down the gallery ahead of Annabel herself, bright as broken glass. "The whole room is asking for you, Your Grace. One cannot keep a duke in a corridor all evening, Muriel, whatever you were reporting to him. Household matters, I imagine?" She is wonderfully thorough about linens. She had taken Godfrey's arm before the sentence ended. The gallery emptied in a heartbeat of everything it had held. It was past midnight when Annabel came to Muriel's small room, sat uninvited on the end of the bed, and delivered her masterstroke in the gentle tone she used for lasting damage. "I ought to have told you sooner," she said. "The Duke spoke to me privately yesterday. He has asked leave to address me. It is quite settled. Only he wishes to make no announcement until the ball for the look of the thing. So you see, whatever kindness he shows you, it is the kindness a man shows his future sister. I'd hate for you to embarrass yourself. You've been so useful this fortnight." The lie was seamless. It was made of everything Muriel could not check from inside this room at midnight. Annabel watched for the flinch. Muriel gave her a calm good night instead, and lay awake with her hand on the beach fan, and made the only resolution she trusted, not to grieve on a sister's word, and not to hope on one either. She would ask the man himself, in daylight, and believe what came back. Muriel did not wait to be found. In the morning, she sent a footman, Thomas, who by now would have carried her messages through fire, with a line asking the Duke to meet her in the open morning gallery, where the light was frank and the doors stood wide, and anyone might walk through. She chose the ground herself, which was the point of it. He came at once. She watched him arrive with his guard half lowered and made herself begin before wanting could argue her out of it. "I will ask you plainly, and I ask you to answer the same way," she said. "Have you courted my sister Annabel? Promised her anything? Sought leave to address her? Said any private word she might honestly build an expectation on?" "No," said Godfrey. "Never. Not one word. Not in any room, on any day. Who told you I had?" "It doesn't matter who. It was Annabel." He said it without heat, and then did something Muriel had not expected. He declined to be angry. "I won't perform outrage at her. A man of my rank goes silent, and the world builds houses on his silence. She read what I let stand, and she used it. The lie is hers. The ground it grew in, I left unfenced. That part is mine, and I am done leaving it." Muriel had prepared herself for denial, for indignation, even for charm. She had not prepared for a man who took his own inventory unprompted. It undid something in her that days of glances had not managed, and while she was still standing in the wreckage of her composure, he broke first, exactly, completely, with both hands open. "Since the morning you came through that door, I have looked for you in every room." His voice was low, and had stopped being careful. I enter, and I look for you, before I know I am doing it. I have been 10 kinds of a coward about saying so, because everything I own makes speeches for me before I open my mouth. The title asks first, and I am dragged behind it. So let me say it as bare as I can make it. I want to court you, Muriel Fallowby, you, openly, and at whatever pace you set, and with the whole county watching or none of it, as you choose. Joy is a physical event. It struck her under the ribs and made her briefly stupid. She wanted to say yes so badly that the word was in her mouth, warm, already shaped. She set it down. "Not yet," she said, and watched him absorb it and stay standing. Stay open, not retreat into the guarded man, which was, she thought, the bravest thing she had seen him do. "Hear the reason. This house believes you are Annabelle's. If you begin courting me while that belief stands, the county will read it as a duke sampling sisters, and every eye will come to me carrying the question, what did the plain one do to manage it? I will not begin us as a suspicion. So, you will correct the assumption yourself, publicly, plainly, before the ball. And Godfrey. His name, first time. She spent it deliberately, like sovereign coin. When you correct it, you will not name me. Not a look, not a gallantry, nothing that makes me the reason. If I am the prize of the correction, then I am only a different kind of make-weight, the thing a man points to when he explains himself. Clear your silence, because it is yours to clear. What happens after must arrive on its own feet. He was quiet for a long moment. "You would have me open a door," he said, "and forbid me to look at what I am opening it for." "Yes." "Then that is what I will do. No bargaining." "No, and afterward, may I?" She had asked a proud man to take a public correction with no reward attached, and he had simply agreed to it. She thought, this is what it is, then. Not the crossing of the floor. This. They stayed in the morning gallery another hour. The talk went where it had been trying to go since the first evening. He told her what it was to be the room's centre, and never its acquaintance, that men rehearsed on the stairs before speaking to him, that he could not praise a bridge without 3 men offering to build one, that being Beaumaire was a role performed at him from all sides, while Godfrey stood inside it like a man in a suit of armour at a summer fair. They address the title, he said. It answers, I am mostly a rumour inside my own life. And I am the opposite creature, Muriel said. You are the centre that no one speaks to. I am the hands at the edge that everyone uses. The room performs for you and leans on me, and neither of us is met. She turned the beach fan over in her lap. What a pair of ghosts we make, Your Grace. What would you want, he asked, if no one needed a single thing from you? Not the household, not your sisters, not one soul. What is the want under all the carrying? No one had ever asked her that. Her father had never. Her sisters had never. Not once in 27 years. No one. The answer came up from somewhere below, thinking, complete, as if it had been waiting years for the question. A table where no one is seated to make another person look grand. Godfrey did not reach for her hand, though she saw his own hand consider it. He did not seal the hour with a kiss or extract one promise to carry away. He stood and bowed as to a duchess and said, Then I have heard what I am for, and left her sitting in the frank morning light, with her heart going like a smith's hammer, courted, uncorrected, uncommitted, and entirely, for the first time in her life, the author of what would happen next. He did it at tea, 2 days before the ball, when the party was assembled in the great drawing-room, and could not pretend afterwards to have heard it second-hand. Godfrey waited for a lull, set down his cup, and stood. Standing was itself an announcement here. No one had asked it of him. The room hushed on instinct. "Before Friday's ball, I find I owe this company a correction," he said, in the flat, carrying voice of a man reading his own sentence aloud. "A belief has taken root under my roof, that I have been courting Miss Annabel Fallowby, or have reached some private understanding with her. I have not. I have made no offer, sought no leave, and spoken no word to justify the belief. It grew because I let it grow. Silence was convenient to me, and I spent it, and that was ill done. The fault of the rumour's life is mine. It ends this afternoon." He inclined his head once, to the room in general, and to no woman in particular. "I thank you for hearing it plainly." He sat down. He did not look at Muriel. He had kept all of his word, the correction delivered with its cost intact and its reward refused, and only Muriel knew what she was watching, which was a proud man paying a debt in public coin and walking away from the change. The room, being a room, began at once to move its money. A county matron who had spent the better part of a fortnight saving the chair beside Annabel now discovered a draught and removed herself. The chair stood suddenly, conspicuously empty. Mr. Frith's voice, which had run at ballroom volume all fortnight, dropped to a murmur mid-sentence, recalibrating. Drusilla's smile went out like a candle in a doorway. And Annabel closed her painted fan with a force that cracked one ivory guard, a small dry snap that those nearest her would remember later as the exact sound of the weak turning. She crossed the room to Muriel with her voice already pitched for the audience. "Well," Annabel said, "I confess I underestimated you. Nearly a fortnight of creeping about with servants and listening at sad old men. I thought it was want of anything better to do. But it was industry, wasn't it? Every confidence in this house has gone into your apron, and you have spent the lot on the Duke. Tell them, Muriel. Tell them what the footmen say about Colonel Bracknell. Tell them what Lady Esther confessed to you in the rose garden. Oh, I saw her weeping on you. What a harvest you must have made, to turn a man's head that was never once turned in your direction before." Frith, smelling the new wind, supplied the polished version from the fireside. "One only observes," he said gently, "that a lady who gathers so much of what is private and rises so quickly in a great man's notice invites a natural question about the sequence of the two." The room's eyes came to Muriel, that same collective look that had gone to the maid at dinner, the look that is itself the sentence. And here was the trap in its full elegance. Every proof of her innocence was itself the crime. She could clear herself in 30 seconds by opening her hands and showing what was in them, that Lady Esther wept over a son's gambling and not a secret shame, that the Colonel's confidences were loneliness and nothing more. And the moment she did it, Annabel's accusation became true. The gathered trust would be spent, in public, to buy Muriel's own safety. She would become the thing they called her by the act of denying it. Muriel stood. She was aware of her heart, and of Godfrey across the room, gone very still with the effort of staying seated, and of the strange calm that arrives when a fight finally puts down its disguise. "You may call me dull. You may not make other people's trust my evidence." She let it stand a moment, unsoftened. "What has been told to me was not told to this room, and it will die with me untold, whatever it costs to keep it. That is all the answer there is, and everyone here who has ever trusted anyone knows it is the only decent one." Lady Minerva was on her feet with the speed of a much younger woman. "I have watched this fortnight with my own eyes," she began. and I am quite willing to tell the company. Not yet. Muriel said it gently, and to Minerva alone, though the room heard. Thank you, but if you answer for me now, I am only defended. I would rather be heard. I will answer for myself. Friday, if it must be somewhere. Let it be Friday. Minerva searched her face, and then magnificently sat back down and took up her tea, a witness holstering herself. That night, in the corridor outside their rooms, Annabel spoke to Drusilla in a voice she did not trouble to lower entirely, because half its purpose was to be carried. If he chooses her before the county, Annabel said, then the county will hear exactly what she is, and exactly why she was brought. Every instruction, every word. Let her climb the whole way up. It is so much further down. Friday arrived, and Beaumere House filled with flowers and florists, and the particular hum of a place preparing to hold 400 people. And inside the Hume, Annabel laid her charges like a sapper. Muriel watched it done, because Annabel no longer bothered to hide the work from her. That was its own message. A word to Frith by the orangery. The phrase, "Should anyone ask tonight," is companion. She was brought as a kind of upper servant, you understand. She keeps things for people. Some women mistake being depended upon for being wanted. It is quite sad, and you will say it sadly. A word to two sympathetic ladies over the seating cards, the same coin in softer wrappers. By afternoon the phrase was loose in the house and breeding, and Muriel could hear her own obituary being rehearsed in pleasant voices behind 3 different doors. It was Drusilla who broke ranks. Not far, but enough. She came to Muriel's small room while Muriel was dressing and stood twisting her bracelet, and said, "Don't stand near him tonight, when the county is here. If you stand near him, she means to tell them everything. The instructions, the grey dresses, why Papa sent you, all of it in front of everyone. She'll do it laughing, Muriel. Stand at the back, just this once more, and nothing need happen." "Thank you," said Muriel, and meant it, and finished pinning her hair. Stand at the back, just this once more. There it was, the family prayer, 9 years old, in her sister's frightened mouth. She went to find Annabel instead. She chose her moment with a steward's care, the long gallery, late light, where Lady Minerva sat writing place cards within easy earshot, not summoned, not warned, simply present, because Muriel wanted no version of this conversation that could later be misremembered at her expense. "Tonight before the county, I think you mean to tell the story of why I was brought here," Muriel said. "I came to offer you something better. Tell it whole. Stand up with me and tell them all of it, the plan, and my agreement to the plan, my part as well as yours. And it will be a strange story about a strange family, and we will all survive it. I will stand beside you while you say it. That is the offer." Annabel looked at her sister for a long moment, and Muriel saw, briefly, the exhaustion under the lacquer, the 16 years of being the Fallowby face, the terror of a currency that only spends while it is young. Then the lacquer closed over it. "The whole story," Annabel said. "The whole story is that there was a place in this family nobody wanted. The fetching, the remembering, the being nothing much in a doorway. And you took it, and we let you, because someone must. You were sent here to go on occupying it where the standing about would do some good. That is your whole story, Muriel. There is no other chapter." "Then tonight I will stop occupying it," said Muriel. She heard Minerva's pen stop. Godfrey came to her an hour before the receiving line formed. He had heard. The house had ears. Everything they heard reached him in the end. He came in quietly and left the door to the crowded gallery standing open behind him. She watched the protective fury working in him like weather looking for somewhere to strike. Say the word and there is no bull, he said. A chimney fire, a dangerous flaw. I will turn 400 people back down the drive tonight and never blink. Or let it run, and I will stand up before the first dance and tell the county precisely what your sisters have done, with names, and let them spend the evening wearing it. No, said Muriel. Twice no. Muriel, if you cancel the ball, she has cost me the room. If you expose her, you have fought for me, and I am carried out of the fire like a fainting woman, and every soul in the county remembers who did the carrying. No, she means to put me on trial in that ballroom, Godfrey. Very well. I have things to say that I have been not saying for 9 years, and a trial is a room where one is finally allowed to answer. Her hands were cold. She did not hide them. She gave him that much truth. I am asking you for the hardest thing I know how to ask a man like you. When it comes, whatever she says, whatever the room does, even if it turns on me entire, wait. Wait until I have answered. Do not save me 1 minute before I have finished. The struggle in him was open and enormous, and he let her see every inch of it, which she loved him for. And when you have finished, he said finally, hoarse, what then? What am I to do? Ask. Do not decide. He bowed his head over her cold hand. He did not kiss it, only rested his brow there a moment, and went out to receive his county. One thing more Muriel arranged, and only one. She found Lady Minerva, and asked no favour of rank, no rescue, no verdict. Only this: tonight no guest is turned away, and no one, whoever it embarrasses, is silenced before they have answered for themselves. Keep the doors open, and every mouth free. The rest belongs to whoever earns it. Child, said Minerva, I have waited 30 years for someone to ask exactly that of this house. And she went to tell the footman. The county ball opened at 9. The county came all together, baronets and grain merchants, the squire and his daughter in her made-over gown, farmers scrubbed to shining, dowagers, the vicar, the horse doctor, 400 souls under the blazing chandeliers of a house that had promised them welcome. Muriel came down in deep blue, not transformed. The gown was simple and merely fit her, which her clothes had not been permitted to do in years. She was, in any honest light, still the plain sister of the beautiful Fallowbys, broad-featured, steady-eyed, the beech fan in her hand where other women carried ivory. She had stopped apologizing for her face somewhere in the last fortnight. It turned out that was the alteration, the gown incidental. Annabel opened the engagement at the receiving line. She simply installed herself at Godfrey's side as the county filed in, close enough that every arriving eye read the tableau it had been promised all fortnight. And Godfrey, unwilling to make a scene and unwilling to feed a lie, crossed to Lady Minerva's other side and continued receiving his guests from there, leaving Annabel beside no one, which she understood within 4 heartbeats and converted, on the spot, from embarrassment into ammunition. She chose her moment as the first set was forming, in the wide clearing by the orchestra, in a voice trained since girlhood to fill rooms. You are all wondering, I think, how my sister comes to be so much noticed this fortnight. The music faltered. The master of ceremonies lost his place. 400 faces turned. Then you should know what she is, a dependent, a collector. For years she has gathered what people tell her, servants, invalids, weeping ladies in gardens, and this fortnight she has spent that hoard on a duke. Ask yourselves what she knows of you, ask what it bought her. The silence after it was total, and into that silence came one small, dry, wooden sound. Muriel Fallowby closing the beach fan with a single click. She walked out into the clearing, not toward Godfrey, not toward shelter, into the open middle, where there was nothing to stand behind, and she did not wait for the Duke, and everyone saw that she did not wait for him. "My sister has told you what I am," Muriel said. "She has left out half, and it is the half that shames me, so you will hear it from me, and not from her. My sisters asked me to come to this party as their foil. I am the plain one. That was the whole qualification. I was to enter first, wear grey, refuse every dance, and be found wanting where the county could see it, so that they would shine the brighter. And I agreed. Understand that. No one dragged me through that door. I have spent 9 years being the person who carries things for my family, and when they asked me to carry this, I said yes, because I had come to believe that being of use was the only seat at the table I was entitled to. Then make weight. I agreed to be it. That is the whole of the ugly thing, from my own mouth, before anyone spends it for me." She turned to Annabel then, and the room turned with her. "You used me. I permitted it. Only one of those things remains yours to answer for." Annabel's chin came up. "No one intended you any harm." "The arrangement I have described," Muriel said, level as a beam, "is the arrangement. Deny it if you can." And Annabel, before 400 witnesses, too proud to lie about facts, and too cornered to leave them, said, "The arrangement was practical, and in 6 words conceded everything but the malice, and the county heard the concession land. What Muriel did next, no one who was in that ballroom ever tired of describing, because it was not a speech. She turned away from her accuser, as if from a finished ledger, and went to the county. To the squire's daughter first, standing at the margin. "Miss Hartle, you told me you love the old country dances and are never asked. Will you lead the first set tonight?" And the girl's father opened his mouth to answer, and Muriel said gently, "Sir, it was your daughter I asked." And the girl said yes with a face like sunrise. To Colonel Bracknell next, moving him herself, chair and all. "Colonel, the orchestra will be on your right, where you will hear every note of it." And then, turning to the doors where the staff stood ranked and invisible, she said, clearly, so the room owned it, "And before the dancing, that evening, the wine at dinner was Miss Drusilla's own elbow and no one else's. Sarah did nothing. I ought to have said her name at the time, and I say it now. Thank you, Sarah, for a fortnight of your patience with all of us." A maid, named, thanked in a ballroom. The county discovered it had waited all its life to see it done. "The house calls this ball a welcome," Muriel said. "Then let it be one. Miss Hartle leads the first set, and the county takes the floor first tonight. The guests of this house before its ornaments. My lords and ladies, we shall follow as we are able." They came. That was the miracle, and no miracle at all. Miss Hartle came because Muriel had seen her all fortnight. The rest came because they had just watched her see a shy young woman, an old soldier, and a servant without regard to rank. The merchant's wife and the horse doctor, the vicar's sisters, the shining farmers, the floor filled from the edges inward, from the overlooked toward the center. The titled guests, after one astonished beat, followed the movement like water finding its level. Couples detached from Annabel's end of the room with the smooth cruelty of tide. The receiving line was wherever Muriel stood. And the first applause of the evening began, not among the peerage, but among the county guests nearest the doors, and rolled inward, and became everyone's, and was for her. Lady Minerva rose, and needed no orchestra stopped to be heard. "I will add only what these eyes saw," she said. On the day the Fallowbys arrived, this woman took the blame for a footman's slip that was not his fault and not hers. On the second morning, she taught her sister the apology her sister then wore as her own. This fortnight she stood accused, holding confidences that would have cleared her, and let herself be doubted rather than spend a single one. And when I offered to fight for her, she refused me. She asked me for no verdict. She asked me to keep the doors open while you gave your own. She resumed her seat. You appear to have given it. Then Lady Minerva set down her cup again, as though a second thought had caught her, and did not trouble to rise. One thing more, while the county is listening, so that it may witness this as well. She looked at Muriel across the width of the room. Beaumare's affairs, the letters, the tenants' petitions, the ordering of these welcomes the house gives, and never quite manages, have wanted a proper secretary these 30 years, and I mean at last to pay one. I know of no soul in England better fitted to the post, and I will have you in it if you will come. The offer is mine, Miss Fallowby, and stands whether my nephew marries you, is refused by you, or never finds the courage to ask. And she took up her tea, and left the sentence standing in the middle of the floor for the whole county to measure. It was Frith, of course, who could not leave it. Extraordinary evening, he said into the settling room, silky final coin in a spent purse, when a duke may be governed before his own county by the family drudge. Muriel didn't even turn her body. Mr. Frith, you called me dull for a fortnight and repeated every sentence I gave you. Do choose one of your own. He opened his mouth. The room waited, generously, and nothing whatever came out of it, and the master of ceremonies, county-born, looked once at Muriel, took her small nod, and signalled the fiddlers to begin the set without him. The Duke spoke once then, from where he stood, pitched low, and only for the nearest to carry back through the room. For the record, she has never told me one private confidence but her own, then nothing, and then the music was rising, and Godfrey Walcote crossed the floor a second time, past Annabel, past Drusilla, the length of everything, and stood before Muriel, with his heart moving visibly in his face like weather with the shutters torn away, and said, "May I ask one question before this county?" "You may ask," said Muriel. "You may not answer for me." The Duke of Beaumare went down on one knee on his own ballroom floor and reached his open hand toward hers, and Annabel came out of the crowd already reaching. Annabel seized Muriel's hand from the kneeling Duke and cried, before the county, "We sent the plainest sister because she was meant to fail." The word fail went through the ballroom like a dropped tray, and the Duke stayed on one knee, his hand still open where hers had been, and Muriel drew her hand free of Annabel's grip, not sharply, the way one takes back a borrowed thing that will not be lent again, and said, "Your Grace, stand. If you ask before this county, you will hear my terms before you hear my answer." But Annabel had passed the border where calculation lives, and what came now came at Muriel's face alone, as if the 400 had ceased to exist. "You were meant to fail," her voice cracked on it. "We chose the grey because it made your skin sallow. I stood in the shop and chose it. I told Frith the hour to ask you, so your refusal would strand you before them all. We ordered you to refuse every dance, so the county would count the hours you stood alone. The whole of it, every day of it, was built so that his eyes would travel down the row of us and stop at me, and they never once stopped at me. Not once, Muriel. From the first morning it was you." Silence. Total, ringing. The room did not breathe. Drusilla made a small broken sound. "I thought she would only be laughed at," she said. "I was," said Muriel. 2 words, and they fell on the county like a verdict on it too, and heads went down among the chandelier light, here and there, quietly, all over the room. Muriel faced her sister. She did not raise her voice. "You sent me to be smaller. I agreed because I was frightened. There would be nothing left if I stopped carrying you. That was your cruelty and my mistake. It ends here." The room passed sentence in the way rooms do, without a gavel. The two matrons who had flanked Annabel all evening stepped past her and joined the first set. Frith retreated until an empty chair stood between himself and everything, and Annabel remained standing exactly where she had planned all fortnight to stand, in the space reserved for the future Duchess of Beaumere, and the county left her in it, alone, with the whole reservation intact, and nobody in England willing to honour it. Godfrey had risen when Muriel bade him. Now, with Annabel's confession spent, and Muriel's answer wholly her own, he went down on one knee again and spoke, up to Muriel, plainly, though his voice carried to the walls. "Before I ask, the county will witness 3 things. Whatever you answer, your welcome in this house stands for life. Refuse me, and nothing closes to you. Whatever you answer, this ball and its arrangement are yours. What you made of it tonight, Beaumere keeps. And whatever you answer, the correction I made stands. No word of it depended on your yes." He drew one breath, like a man at a river's edge. "Nothing you could refuse me will be taken from you. Now then, Muriel Fallowby, may I have your hand in marriage?" Muriel looked down at him for a long moment, the most powerful man in 6 counties, bareheaded on his own floor, his hand open and empty and patient, and the county heard the plain sister set her terms for a duke. "You may, on 3 terms, said here, where everyone can keep you honest. First, I will not be useful by default. You will ask, and I may say no. Accepted. Second, if your silence gives strength to a lie, you will correct it yourself. Myself, and at once. Accepted. Third, this ball remains a welcome. No woman will stand here merely to make another look greater. No one, said Godfrey, man or woman, ever again. Accepted, all 3, unamended, before this county." And the county ratified her. An old baronet by the orchestra bowed his white head. Simply bowed, as men do when something larger than themselves goes by. Thomas the footman was grinning in the doorway with a shamelessness that would have cost him his place in any other house in England, and in this one, tonight, cost him nothing. And the couples of the first set, farmers and merchants and the vicar's sisters, Miss Hartle at their head, began to stamp, in time, the old county rhythm of shoes on a good floor, the sound their grandfathers had made at harvest homes, until the chandeliers shivered with it. Muriel waited for it to crest, because she wanted no syllable of what came next to be lost. On those terms, yes. She extended her hand, hers, first, the reach entirely her own. Godfrey took it, and did not rise. He stayed kneeling, her hand in both of his, until she drew him up herself, and the county watched the tallest man in the room be lifted to his feet by the plain sister's hand, like a thing being granted. "May I kiss you?" he asked, low enough that only she heard. "When we are alone," said Muriel, whose terms were terms. "There are 400 people." He kept her hand in his, and the room came apart into cheering, and the fiddlers struck up without being asked, and behind the 2 of them, unmoving in all that motion, stood the beautiful Fallowby sisters, rose and gold, magnificent and ruined, and entirely, publicly understood. It was very late when the county at last danced itself out, and the final carriages had ground away down the drive, and Beaumere let go the breath it had held all evening. Godfrey found her in the south gallery, where she had gone to stand among the cooling sconces and the moths, the beach fan in her hand. "You said when we were alone," he said from the doorway. He did not cross to her yet. He had learned that much. "We are alone. I counted the house twice." "So we are." She was aware of her own heart, and did not trouble to steady it for him. He came the length of the gallery, unhurried, and stopped the last step short, as he had stopped once before at this same balustrade, with a falling fan between them. This time she set the fan down herself, deliberately, on the cool stone, and left both her hands empty. "May I?" he asked. The same two words. He would always, she understood now, ask them. "Now," said Muriel. "Yes." He kissed her the way he had crossed the floor, plainly, wholly, without performance, one hand coming to the side of her plain face, as though it were the only face in the room. It was not the beginning of wanting, but the end of a long withholding of it, and she gave it back measure for measure, choosing every second, her hands finding the front of his coat and staying. When they parted, she did not step back, and neither did he. "That," she said, when she had the breath for it, "was worth waiting for the room to empty." "Everything about you," said the Duke of Beaumere, "has been worth the waiting." And he did not reach for the fan, and neither did she. And for a while the lit gallery kept them both, and asked nothing at all. 3 months later, Beaumere House held a wedding breakfast that refused, by design, to end. It simply widened, as the afternoon came on, into the next county welcome, so that the farmers arriving at 4 found the wedding still warm in the rooms, and were absorbed into it, which was rather the idea, as everyone knew whose. There was no raised table at the wedding breakfast, and no beauty placed beside plainness to improve by comparison. People sat where conversation and affection carried them. The Duchess of Beaumere went through her own house with the plain beechwood fan in her hand. She was not transformed. The county would have been obscurely disappointed if she had been. Same broad, steady face, same level eyes, only the clothes fit now, deep blues and good wool chosen by the woman inside them. She wore the fan at a wedding, full of ivory and gilt, without a flicker of apology. The terms, the county noted, were not ornaments either. When the receiving of the 4 o'clock guests wanted arranging, Godfrey came and found her, and asked her, plainly, before the footman and without embarrassment, "Will you take the east door, or shall Aunt Minerva?" And his Duchess considered and said, "Minerva, I am wanted in the kitchens first," and changed the plan, and the plan was changed. When the vicar, beaming, congratulated the couple on the news, already loose in the parish, that her Grace was refurbishing almshouses she had never promised to refurbish, Godfrey did not glance at his wife to repair it. "The report is ahead of the truth, and the fault is mine for letting it run," he told the vicar plainly, before the man's tea had cooled. "Nothing is settled. When it is, you will hear it from us and not from the lane." And at the doors, all afternoon, gentry and county came through the same entrance and were announced in the order of their arriving, a baronet behind a seed merchant, and the sky did not fall. Old Colonel Bracknell sat where the music met his good ear without asking anyone, because his chair was simply always there now. Of the 2 beautiful sisters, only one had written. Drusilla's letter had come within the month, and it was 3 lines long. No excuse in it, no account of what she had meant, nothing of her own injury or her own shame, only the thing done, and the naming of it, and the asking of pardon, exactly in the form Muriel had taught her once at a morning-room window. Muriel let it sit a week, because some letters ought to be felt to travel, and then answered it. Annabel had written too, 6 close pages of it, all explaining. Those pages Muriel read once, and put away in a drawer, unanswered, where they remain. For the first time in 9 years, the sisters had to carry what they had written without asking Muriel to make it lighter. Lady Minerva, surveying it all from the best light in the room, delivered her verdict to her nephew with a raised glass. "I must thank your wife," she said. "A duchess who is free to say no has made you punctual, Godfrey. 30 years of your family's word being law, and it turns out all you ever needed was one person who might decline you. You were 40 minutes early this morning. For your own wedding. I nearly sent for the physician." "I was aware," said the Duke, with the gravity of a man quoting scripture, "that attendance was not compulsory." Toward evening, when the fiddles were tuning for the first set of the welcome proper, Godfrey came across the floor to his wife of 9 hours. He still crossed rooms for her, the county still nudging one another when he did it, bowed, and asked for the first dance. "Not yet," said Muriel. She sent him to stand with his own guests, and crossed the room herself to where Miss Hartle stood at the margin out of 16 years of habit, and said, "Miss Hartle, the first invitation of this house is yours, and will be every welcome, as long as I keep these doors. Choose your partner and lead us in." And the girl, in a new gown this time, though that was not the point, as both of them knew, chose the horse doctor's son, scarlet to his ears, and led the county onto the Duke's floor, while the Duke stood waiting his turn like everybody else. Then the Duchess came back to him and held out her hand first, palm up, the beech fan folded against her wrist. "Now you may ask me again." "Muriel," said Godfrey, taking her hand as though it were still the first time and might be refused, because it might, always, and that was the marriage. "May I have this dance?" "Yes," she said. And the house, full of the county, loud with fiddles, its every door standing open, closed warm around the two of them, and kept them.